This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. Anna McNuff set out in July 2013 to cycle 11,000 miles through all 50 states. Starting in Alaska, she made her way to the lower 48, cycling a unique route from Washington State to Texas. She encountered floods in Colorado, blizzards in South Dakota, and the Polar Vortex in Arkansas. She ended her 7-month journey in Hawaii, cycling to the top of Mount Haleakala, a 10,000-foot volcano in Maui. You can read more about her adventure at thebig5-o.com. Anna McNuff, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Thank you. Hello.
Anna, how did you get started in cycling, and what was it about it that really got you hooked?
Strangely enough, it was actually through work. So my employer is very big on cycling. They support cycling throughout the UK. And I started in about 2009. I became part of a group of people that would go out and spend their weekends cycling together, work colleagues, which is quite strange. And just from that, I started to fall in love with spending more and more time on the bike. And so between 2009 and 2011, I actually went on a few short cycling tours around Britain because I thought this seems like quite a nice way to see the country, and I haven't seen much of Britain before. So I went and cycled through Scotland, and then did the same through Wales the following year, and I just absolutely loved it. I realised, I had never seen the country in a way that you see it from the seat of a bicycle. You breathe everything in. If you've got to go over a mountain, you experience that in your legs. Everything is just times by 10 in the way that you see the scenery around you. So I just absolutely loved it. And from there, I sort of put it aside for about a year or so. But I always had it in the back of my mind that if I was going to go somewhere and I was going to go somewhere big, that it would be by bicycle. So, yeah, that was the start of it, really, 2009.
How long were you thinking about this U.S. trip before you made it happen?
It was a year to the day, really. And it was honestly I know people talk about having this aha moment, but I woke up one day and I'd been feeling rather odd the whole day, really just like travel itchy, and you get that wanderlust and you're just thinking, I have to leave this country, I have to go somewhere, anywhere. I'd been feeling like that all day, and then it came to the evening time and I started reading a book called Vagabonding, actually. And there was this quote in it which said, vagabonding begins the moment you stop making excuses, you start planning, and you look at a map with a narcotic tingle of possibility. And I just thought, I want to look at a map with a tingle of possibility. I'm fed up of just looking and thinking, one day. So that was it. I literally told a few people the following morning. I decided I was going to go somewhere, and I said to them, I'm going on a big trip, I'm going somewhere, I haven't decided where yet. And I got a map out. I looked at the States. I've been a few times before, but I'm not quite sure what happens in that kind of vast space. So it seemed like a really, really good, fascinating place to go. And that was it. I made a sort of a headline of the plan before I actually, drilled into the detail and just started telling people, and that was it. There was no way out after that.
Tell me about the budget. How much did you allot yourself, and how much did you have to take time to spend, or was it already there?
I had a little pot of money saved up, and it was kind of a call between doing the sensible adult thing you should do in putting your money into buying a house or a car or something grown up, or going and blowing it on a big adventure. So I had a little bit of money there already. The way I decided, I basically just looked along the route. It was quite a complicated thing to do, but I looked along the route and I decided how I was going to stay. Was I doing campgrounds or motels or whatever? I looked at the average cost of those kind of things. I took a look at what kind of equipment I might need to get me to the start line, made a massive kit list, flights and everything else. So I kind of mapped everything else out first, and then added up basically everything I thought that would cost, did it on a day by day, and then added on the equipment cost at the end. And I came up with about $50 a day that I thought was reasonable to allow for food, accommodation, a little bit of bike maintenance as well in there. And that's what I settled on. I pretty much stuck to it. I came back a little bit over, but I probably could have allowed for a little bit more contingency, to be honest. I probably should have put a bit more in there. But it was a tough thing to do. But I think the only thing you can do is just to start somewhere. You can ask as many other people as you like, but I think things change so quickly and the price of things change quickly that yeah, you've got to do your own research, I think. And I could have done it for less. I could have eaten baked beans and super noodles and instant mash all the time. But every now and then I decided that I might quite like to actually, eat in a restaurant and be sociable. So I think you can do it for less.
Was this your first time in the US?
It was not, no. And part of the reason I wanted to go is because I've been before and I loved it. I just love it's a very exciting place. I'd been to Boston, New York, and Miami and then LA before. I was very lucky to be taken when I was a kid by my parents to LA. But I suppose that was actually the reason for me going back, is I'd always looked at America and I'd seen all these pictures of your amazing national parks that you have and some of the more cultural cities in the East. And I'd always had it in my head, oh, that's fine, I'll go there at some point. And I actually thought, when am I going to go there? I need to go now, So, and that was my big thing about choosing the states. I looked at the map and I thought, I know what happens in, California. We get all these images over here in the UK of Arnold Schwarzenegger and it all just being beautiful oceans and everything else. And then I know what goes on in New York City. But I just thought, what is that big bit in the middle? What happens there? Like, that is a huge expanse of land. And I did a bit of research and I found that in terms of like wildlife, geology, cultures, attitudes, the diversity that you get in the US compared to other countries around the globe, it's just incredible. It's off the chart, and it's something we don't have here in the UK. We have melting pots, but yours is on such a wider scale. And I thought to have that in one country is quite unique, and a country that I speak the language. So that was my intrigue with the US. Really, I went to go and sort of, I guess, satisfy my own curiosity, which I think is a good reason to do any adventure, really.
What was your biggest fear before you got started?
It was probably split between two, I have to say, on an even keel, and both of them probably sound equally ridiculous. The first one is actually being hit by a truck or something, because I think you do, when you plan a big adventure, you do as much as you can to manage the risk, and you manage it down to a certain point, but there are certain things out of your control. And I can wear high-vis clothing, I can have mirrors on my bike and all that, but if that's an accident that could happen. And I was quite aware that the roads are quite big and there were going to be places where I was going to be riding without adequate provision for cyclists. So that was a little bit of a worry that something could happen out of my control that would bring the trip to an end, or, whatever else. The other fear, which was, I guess, a more emotional fear, was that I wouldn't enjoy it, that I'd get out there and this thing that I'd spent my whole, the past year dreaming up and sacrificed a lot for I just wouldn't enjoy it, and I'd want to go home. But I guess I decided that, everything is a choice, and you can, if it really was that bad, I'd just change it, and I'm going to come home, or I'd go and fly somewhere else. So that was a real fear, but I think that's a fear you have with doing anything that's very different from your day-to-day life. You've just got to jump and try it, and it's always changeable. And it turns out it was absolutely incredible. So best decision, really.
So I think the first fear is certainly a reasonable fear. Did you have any close calls at all?
Yeah, I did. I had a fair few, actually. And it's amazing because I'd probably have maybe one every few weeks where I'd think, oh my goodness me, that was really close. Had I been a couple of centimetres, or had I swerved, I would have hit that truck or car or whatever. I think the biggest problem is actually not the truck drivers. I'd say 90% of the truck drivers are really, really considerate. They understand that you need to give you're supposed to give 6 feet really to a cyclist because of the vacuum that the truck creates. The biggest problem was motorhomes, because you have a lot of tourists who pick up the motorhomes, and they've got, and the really, really big ones, I'm talking like the ones out of, like Meet the Fockers, those kind of ones that are huge, and they have no gap in them. So they create this enormous vacuum. And one went past me, I think it was on the way to Yellowstone, and it came past within a couple of feet of me, which doesn't sound particularly close, but the vacuum it created sucked me right in towards it. So I was, I don't know, within 10 centimetres, it felt like of going under their back wheel. And of course they drove off, completely oblivious. And I was there thinking, oh my gosh, like I thought I was a goner at that point. So nothing like that one happened again after that, but I did have a few close shaves. But I guess you just, that kind of makes you just be a little bit more cautious. I'd constantly, if I was going over a hill where there'd be a blind brow, if you see what I mean, I'd look behind me and see what was coming, so that I knew if there was a big truck, worst case scenario, you've got to be in a situation where you can get yourself off the road. So it was a bit scary at points. But on the whole, people were considerate, which surprised me.
Tell me about your bike.
It's beautiful. She's so beautiful. I miss being on her every day. I'm going to call it by name. I named it Boudica after a Celtic warrior princess that kind of stands for strength and ambition. It's a Santos travel master. So I did a bit of research. I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it. And that was my personal decision. I wanted to do it on a bike that was going to last, go the distance, that wasn't going to break on me because I had a visa restriction. I had this, 50-state challenge to do. So I invested in the Travel Master. A lot of people that cycle around the world, they either do it on a Santos, or they'll go for maybe a Genesis or a Koya Mayata, which is the one that Mark Beaumont cycled the world on. So the Dutch actually make really good touring bikes, it seems. So the biggest toss-up was really, do I go for a 26-inch or a 29-inch wheel? And I thought because I was in the US, I'd have no problem getting 29-inch replacement parts. And you go a lot faster, and I was going to be on roads quite a lot of the time. So that was the decision there. And it's just a very strong, sturdy, well-built bike. And it served me absolutely beautifully. I had one broken spoke, which luckily happened within about 5 miles of a town. I had a lot of new cassettes, chains, but nothing actually gave out on the bike, which is exactly what I'd hoped for. Because it's one thing, hitting weather and other things that stop you, but when your bike breaks down, yeah, it can be a bit of a pain. Yeah, it's beautiful. Love it. Most comfortable thing. It's like an armchair.
So I've seen some photos. You're running front and rear racks with panniers on both.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about how much you're hauling and how that setup worked out for you.
While I was fully loaded with my bike, it was about 80 pounds, which is quite a lot. Because, I had basically big back panniers, and then I had my tent strapped across the back as well on top of that. And then in the front, I'd have my kind of electrical equipment and other things that I needed easy access to. You can always go lighter. People go so much lighter. I made a bit of a trade-off between, I took a 2-man tent with me when I could have gone with a 1-man, but I thought I'm going to be spending a lot of time in my tent. And when it gets dark if it's getting dark at 5 o'clock in the evening or whatever, you're in your tent from that point onwards. So you need to have a little bit of space. So I made the decision that I'd go a little bit heavier and actually be a little bit more comfortable. I wasn't going for a speed record or anything. So to me, it was all about enjoying the journey and being comfortable. So I was hauling a lot of gear, but not as much as some of the people I met. I tried to be as light as possible. And I had a rule that if I hadn't used it for 10 days, then I'd send it home. So that kind of kept me on track. If I felt like something had sat at the bottom of my pack for a really long time, I would just send it home. And I was very good at not actually buying anything at all, like no kind of memorabilia or anything like that. I'd really just kept it light, which was a new thing for me as well.
Give me an example of something you sent home.
I had a spare water bottle carrier I sent home. I sent home a pair of headphones I'd brought they weren't ones that went in your ear. They kind of go on your cheekbones, and they were great, but I actually found that I felt perfectly safe when I was listening to music. If I had one headphone in, I'd only do it in places there weren't that much traffic anyway, but that was one of the things I sent home. Towards the end of the trip, I sent home my solar panel for my battery. I had a Power Monkey, which basically holds a load of battery charge, and because I'd stopped camping so much towards the end of the trip, I was able to find power sources a lot more easily. So I'd sent that kind of thing home. I would also, because I went through so many weather systems, I'd sort of send some of my lighter clothing home because I'd managed to organise a load of heavier kit being sent out. So it was a constant rolling, I think there were some things that were in my pack from the start to the finish, but a lot of it was new things coming in, old things going out, just to be able to cope with the different weather systems, really.
Anna, what kind of distances were you riding each day?
So I did work it out, and I averaged 75 miles a day, which was amazing because that is exactly what I wanted to average. I had a few more. The reason I ended up doing a few less miles is because I had to stop for a few more days than I'd expected due to storms and things like that. The most I did in a day was 130 miles, which was a pretty long day. And it wasn't a flat one either. So that was getting to, I think I got to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I still had 60 miles to go. And that was a little bit soul destroying, but there's nothing to do except put your head down and get on with it. So that was a day I probably wouldn't want to repeat, but it really varied depending on terrain. So when I was going over the Rockies, I probably averaged about 60 miles a day because it'd take me 3 or 4 hours to get up a climb fully loaded. And when I was going across like the Midwest, And it's really flat. There's not any mountains there really. So I'd bash out over 100 miles a day quite easily, and that would be fine. So it just varied really from terrain and weather as well. If I felt like I was going to hit some really bad weather, then I'd try and drop the mileage down or get it in earlier on while the weather was good.
How did you come up with this route? Did you just take a map and a crayon and draw on it to figure out how you could get through the lower 48 the fastest? Or how did that work?
Yeah, pretty much. It was I've got all the iterations of the drawings. It's quite funny to look back at. The first thing to me for this whole adventure, it was I guess it was like a 3-stage process. The first thing to me was, if I'm doing this, I want to go and see all the things I want to see. There's no point in just going and saying, I've cycled the 50 states, but I haven't actually seen any of the beauty, and everything I've looked at in emails and gone, I really want to go there. So that was the first thing I did. I put stars on the map of the US. I put stars on all the places that I really wanted to go and see. And that came from my 1,000 Things to See Before You Die, that book. So I threw all those stars on the map. Then I came across the Adventure Cycling Association, and they're an amazing resource, and their maps are incredible. They're very, very useful, very informative. And so I thought, if I can manage to stick to their routes as much as possible, that will make me feel a little bit more comfortable that I'm on roads where there's at least some kind of provision for cyclists, or people are used to seeing cyclists on those roads. Because it's very difficult being in another country. I mean, I don't even know what a road looks like in a town, 20 miles away from me if I've never cycled in it. You don't know until you're there. So that was the second thing, really, to try and use as much of those adventure cycling routes as I can. And I guess the overarching thing of all of that was, weather, seasons, going, well, if I'm going to make it over the Rockies, I need to, and that was really important to me. I really wanted to see them. I didn't want to miss them out. So I thought, well, I need to do that before a certain point in the year. And I probably need to work my way, north to south, and I need to wind up somewhere in the south. So I literally just traced and retraced a line. It's like a maths problem. And then the first route I ended up with was about 16,000 miles. So I had to go back and then come off the Adventure Cycling Association routes and hash out bits. And that was quite soul destroying, to be honest. It was really hard to, how do you weigh off seeing seeing Mount Rushmore versus going down to the Florida Keys? It was horrible. I really hated that point. And I'm probably behaving like a sport brat because I'm getting to see all of it. But yeah, that was tough. Yeah, and the funny thing was, when I'd done that, I actually then went and looked at other people's routes. There are a couple of other people that have done it, and it wasn't too dissimilar from theirs. So that made me feel confident that actually I'd probably pick something that was quite efficient. So that was it. It was set.
Did you get lonely out there?
Do you know what? Not as much as I thought I would. And like I said, that was when I said earlier that one of my biggest fears was not enjoying it. It was a loneliness thing. I thought, that is an awful long time in your own company. And normally I've not got a problem with my own company, but I didn't know how it would fare. And I really didn't. I probably had maybe 4 or 5 days, and they would last a day or two, where I felt quite, I think I was just frustrated and tired, and I probably in that moment didn't want to be where I was. It wasn't that I ever regretted going on the trip. I never had a moment like that, because I think you have to put it in perspective. I was literally living a dream. I was absolutely living that. But it was days where I'd just done a couple of long days, and I'd be in the middle of nowhere, and there'd be no one around. I'd have no one to talk to, and I'd just think, oh, I'm just tired. I want to fast forward a week and be, in somewhere more exciting. So that happened a few times, but like I said, it lasted a day or so, and something would always happen to snap me out of it. The worst and most memorable time was probably about 6 weeks before the end, I took a video of it actually, because it was my lowest point in the trip, and I thought I need to record this. I was in Florida, and I'd just come through the Carolinas and Georgia, where there's not much space for cycling on the roads, and there's one road and you're on the road with big trucks. And I'd had a lot of rain, and just a lot of storms really, and so I was just feeling a bit tired and run down and constantly hassled. And I just got really homesick at that point, and I think that was because it was 6 weeks towards the end, and that lasted for about a week. It was quite tough, really, because every morning I was thinking, right, this is the day I'm gonna, snap out of it. It's fine. I'm gonna perk up. It's great, but it's just quite hard to go through the motions of 75 miles a day when your heart's not in it for that week, really. But that was it, literally a week out of the whole trip, and everything else was amazing. And I did snap out of that. I hit the sunshine of Florida and some smooth roads and a bit of nice bike lanes, and that was it. I was back in it. So yeah, I was surprised.
Okay, you talked about the low point. Now tell me some examples of some of the high points for you.
Probably seeing my first grizzly bear in Alaska. That was amazing. I mean, I thought that's ridiculous. I just think so, how many, all right, we don't have bears here in the UK and they're a bit more frequent, over in the US. But for me, who goes to Alaska? It's just ridiculous. And I just could not believe I was there for a start. And then I was in Denali in the national park and I saw 3 grizzlies and one was 100 meters away, just truffling around at the side of the road, going about his daily business. And I just felt so kind of blessed to be able to see that. I thought there are so many sights in this world that you never get to see, and this is one of them, and it's right there, and that's incredible. And for them, the way it's done in Denali in the national park, they try to keep everything so wild and so natural. So I really felt like, it's not like seeing it in a zoo. I was actually seeing it in its kind of natural habitat, which was amazing. So that was a real high. Other highs were probably... And this is a place I go back to in my mind. If I'm ever feeling a little bit like things are getting a bit too much, I go back to, it's 6 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the Nevada desert. And I've been on the road since 4:30 trying to escape the heat. And you just look across and you've come up because the Nevada desert is kind of split into lots of basins and ranges. And you crest over the top of one of these peaks and you can just see for 30 miles across the next basin, and there is not a soul around, and all there is like the sun just coming up, a little bit of a breeze. That for me is kind of were amazing points of the trip. Yeah, so they're probably my highs. And then the other stuff is really just human kindness, unbelievable acts of human kindness the whole way. And they were certainly some high points as well, when something would happen and a family would take me in over a blizzard in South Dakota out of the middle of nowhere. They'd just come and say, just stay at my house, it's fine. And I'd go with it and have the most amazing few days with this family who I'd leave feeling like I was actually part of their family. So yeah, they were definitely the highs.
So you mentioned earlier that you'd been to the East Coast, you'd been to the West Coast, but there's this big part in the middle that you'd never seen before. Tell me about, what are some of the states that stick out in your mind? Could be both good and bad.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the first one that jumps that people, because I get asked a lot, what's your favourite state? And it's a really hard question to answer because they've all got different things to offer. But for me, the biggest surprise was Utah, actually. I wrote down, before I left, I wrote down next to every state, I wrote down 3 words because I wanted to write down what I thought about that state before I left. And then when I came back, what I thought about it, because that was the point of the trip, to, kind of test my perception of it. Utah is just unbelievable. I mean, the scenery, I could not believe when I rounded the corner for the first time and I came into Zion National Park. I started to see the landscape change a little bit as you come out of Nevada and cross the state line. But coming around the corner and seeing Zion, I just couldn't believe that I'd spent 28 years of my life on this planet and not seen something like that. It's just so alien to me. I've seen beautiful parts of Britain, I've seen parts of Europe, but to see the red rocks and it's all just so enormous, that was a real jaw-dropping moment. And then from Zion, I then went to Bryce National Park as well. And again, so completely different. And it just blew my mind. And also within that little bottom corner, I'd say that bottom corner was kind of the high point of the trip, because I then could go to the Grand Canyon. A couple of days later, I was on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, which again is another mind-blowing sight, completely different, all still part of that Colorado plateau. Yeah, so those were some of the natural things that amazed me. And Yellowstone National Park as well. I wrote in my blog, I said, you have to go and see it. It's ridiculous. There's this huge volcano and it's just, to me, it was like being in a fantasy book. There's like bubbling pools everywhere and things actually look like they do in the pictures that you see, which is really, really rare. So that was another thing as well. And then as far as the other things that surprised me in the middle were just the small towns. We have small towns in the UK, but they're never that far apart. And I think one thing about the US is that sometimes you have a stronger sense of community because there'll be a town of 30 or 300 people or whatever, and then there's 50 miles of nothing, and then there's another town. Whereas in the UK, they tend to kind of splurge into each other. So that was something for me to learn, that how the people lived in these little towns. And they just, it's such a wonderful sense of community. You walk down the shop and everyone knows everyone, and it's really nice. So those were some things that I was delighted I'd actually discovered, because that's what I wanted to set out to do, is to kind of blow my mind basically, and it got blown.
Along the way, you're doing some speaking at elementary schools and high schools, for example. Tell me about some of those experiences.
This was actually some of the I would say one of the best parts of the trip was when I got to go into a school. And it wasn't easy to do, because I tried to do a lot of emailing beforehand. But of course, if you get a cold email from some strange girl from the UK saying, can I come and speak to your kids, it's not always going to get a response, I think. So I managed to set some up before I'd left, but a lot of it was actually through people I'd met along the way. I'd always ask people if I was staying with them or whatever, if they knew any teachers. And a lot of the school talks were completely off the fly. I think one of them, I happened to be staying with someone one night, and he said, we've got an evening for gifted children. Would you come in and speak? And it was at 6:30 at night. And so that day, I'd cycled like 105 miles across Ohio, and I kind of basically skidded into the school, completely red-faced and sweaty, did this talk, and the kids were just amazing. So I think I managed to do, I would love to have had more time to do more talks, but they were the best thing, because for me, the whole point of this trip, when I thought about going, I thought, well, I really want to do it to kind of to contribute to society. All right, this is a big adventure for me, but there must be something in this where I can, do some good for the world. So I thought about what had got me to the point of the trip and what had given me the confidence and ambition to be able to go and do a trip like that. And I thought it was because I had sport when I was a kid. I grew up in and around everyone playing sport now, and I thought, it's really sad that there are some kids in the world that, all right, maybe they don't want to do it as a choice. They don't want to be outside and be active, but to at least give them the choice and the opportunity, and to say to them, it's possible. I've just come in and I've ridden my bike across your country, and to see the little faces of the kids that might never have been out of their town light up when you show them a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, and you're like, I've just cycled from there. Like, you can do that. That's possible. And their faces are just like bright as anything, and that just made me so happy, and it really made me feel like what I was doing was actually making a difference. And just, if I could plant even one seed with a little child, that says, when I grow up, I want to go and, I've had letters from kids and say, I'm going to come and walk across Britain when I'm older, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to kayak this, and of course I'm just like, yeah, do it, great. To have people out there exploring the world, I think, is only a good thing. It promotes understanding and reduces ignorance. So I think the more we can get that into the younger generation, then the better the world's going to be honest. So for me, it was a really great part of the trip.
Tell me about this Right to Play charity that you were supporting.
Yeah, so that fits in quite nicely with the school and the kids, and trying to inspire children. Because when I was looking, I thought, well, I've never raised money for charity before. I've always been saving it for something quite big. I've done endurance challenges before, like I've done Ironman and ultra marathons, which lots of people raise money for, but I really wanted to save mine for something big. So I put into Google, I literally put the words kids play sport, and up popped Right to Play. And I read a bit about them. And then for me, it was really important to actually feel, if I was going to pedal for that cause, I really wanted to feel passionate about it. So I went in and I met the guys in the London office, and I just fell in love with the charity. They're an incredible charity. They basically believe that kids should be kids. There are kids around the world, and they now work in the developed world as well, where they don't even have simple access to things like a football or any kind of sports equipment, or even just the time to go outside and just play. And so what they do is they give them sports equipment to do that, but they also use the play as a kind of transformative power to teach them things, because the fact of the matter is, if you need to be taught something, it's a lot more fun and a lot easier to remember if you learn it through a game. So they do things like teach kids how to protect themselves against malaria, against AIDS in places where that's a problem, and they do it all through play. And the kids, they grow in confidence, and they become leaders and kind of a source of social positive, change, rather than getting sucked into being in a gang or going to war. They have greater ambitions because of them being exposed to play and sport as a young child. So it's an incredible charity, and we raised $16,000 roughly, a little bit more in the end, which the charity have told me means that 2,000 more kids now get access to some form of kind of structured play program. So I'm absolutely stoked with that. I think that's, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot of money. Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. Can't believe it.
Okay, you mentioned in your blog that I won't hold you to it, but you're talking about writing a book. Tell me about that.
Oh, you used to hold me to that. I'm holding myself to it, absolutely. One of the things I discovered on this trip is that I love writing. I think there is a real art in sharing a story. And I don't mean writing in that a lot of people, I think, write blogs where it's just, this happened this day, that happened that day. And it doesn't take the audience with them. I think for me, it was really important to share the adventure. And just like I was saying, in planting a seed with a little kid, you can do that with lots of people. And if it makes one person want to get up off their sofa or, bust out and go and do something more interesting and exciting, then that's awesome. So I really enjoyed that part of the process. And I got quite a positive response to the blog. People said they really felt like they were kind of on the adventure with me. And I think photos and videos help with that. So I really feel there's a story to be told because I had to cut so much out of those blogs. And it's not just what I did and what I saw. It's the things that it taught me and the way it shifted my perspective. So I'm going to write a book. I've just bought a new computer, big investment, and I'm going to sit down and write a book. I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I do feel there's a story to be told. And like I said, if it changes one or two people's perspectives, or if it intrigues them about a part of the USA that they might want to go and see, then it will be mission accomplished, really. And I'm going to try and make it funny. I love the way Bill Bryson writes. He's my literary hero. So he manages to pick up all these different threads of a mixture between fact and humour and just pull them all together in one big piece. So that will be the style of my book. It will be light-hearted, but it will be trying to educate people who might not normally be interested in history or politics or geology. Just like me, I wasn't really interested at school, but when you're there and experiencing it, and the characters that you meet along the way are bringing that story to life, then it becomes that much more engaging. So that's what the book's going to be about, really. It's about taking people on the journey that I went on.
I wanted to point out a few things that I learned from reading through your blog. First of all, there's no root beer in the UK. Well,
right, so we did have it. We had it in McDonald's when I was a kid growing up, and my older brother used to love it. And no, they've taken it away. I think you can get it. If you hunt it out, you can get it, but it's not a thing. I mean, we have cream soda. That's a thing, but still not so much for adults. But yeah, adults just don't drink root beer. I know. I quite like it, so.
The other thing I learned about was this thing called netball, which I'd never seen before.
Yeah. This makes me laugh so much. Honestly, if you try and explain, because it's what I played at school. Is it a rubbish version of basketball? I'm going to get told off for saying that. It's basically, I explain to people, it's basketball, but you don't move. So we're very good at it as a country. So are Jamaica and Australia. It's a good game. Once you watch it being played properly, it's very, very fast paced. Faster paced than basketball.
So I watched a video. So you move, but you don't dribble the ball. You just pass it, and then as soon as you catch it, you have to stop and then pass it before you can advance down the field. Yeah,
and there's no backboards on the net.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part.
Yeah, so you have to be so accurate with your shooting, and it suits really tall girls, and some boys play it, but it's predominantly been a female sport in the UK. But that's one of our school sports. We don't have baseball. We have a little bit of basketball, but basically when I was growing up, it was field hockey and netball were the two big sports at my school, and that was quite usual for a kind of London girls' school. So yeah, netball, taking it to the masses.
The final thing was. That's when you were in Memphis and you mentioned that song and that has that lyric, walking with my feet 10 feet off the Beale. I always thought that lyric was with my feet 10 feet off the pier.
Oh, so. I thought it was beer. I know. Well, this is the thing about being in Memphis. I started singing it in my head, as you're starting to arrive into Memphis. And then I thought I should look up the lyrics because I've actually got no idea what they mean. Yeah, you just mutter them. But it was amazing how being in Memphis, how much of the song it brought to life, and especially with the line about Reverend Al Green, and I went down to the Tabernacle Church and went to Al Green's gospel service, and I was like, this is crazy, it's in the song, it's been here for years and years, so yeah, I thought that was funny.
You had one really great quote in your blog. I wondered if you would mind if I read that.
No, you go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll try to make this sound good because I thought this was really great. It says, if there's one precious secret I'd like to share, it's this. When you put yourself out there, way beyond your comfort zone, indulge in endeavors that cause your heart to beat fast and your chest to tighten, amazing things happen. Doors open, opportunities arise, and most importantly, the painful chinks in your armor heal. The cracks that threaten to make you fall apart, they seal over. You become far stronger than you'd ever imagined. You grow immeasurably. You surprise yourself, and you find it a far easier process to meet your own gaze in the mirror.
Yeah.
That was great.
You read it very well. Thank you. Did it justice. Yeah. So I think that was what kept repeating on me the whole way through the trip. I just kept thinking all these things that I'm frightened about. Actually, I'm more frightened when I think back to the trip now than I was actually when I was on it, because when you're in the moment, you've got no time to be frightened. You've got no time for fear. You're so focused on just moving forward. And I think being on your own as well, you do learn a lot of things about yourself. I mean, it sounds quite cheesy. They're not like no revelations or whatever, but you start to understand the way you process things. And I think that's a really, really good thing. And I just think you've got two choices in life. You can either sit there and think the world's a scary place, and there are obviously scales of this, but you can think the world's a scary place and that you'll just stay safe and you'll do what you want to do, and you get to being 85 and you've set your grandkids on your knee and they say, "Oh, tell me a story, Grandma," and you go, "Well, I worked really hard. I did some fun stuff at my weekends and you just haven't really got much to say to them." Or you can go the other way, where you've done some things which absolutely scare you witless, where you fail at things, you stumble ungracefully through the whole of your life, but goodness me, you've got a great tale to tell, and you really feel like you've made the most of your time on this planet. It is so short. And that in that blog, I was just, for the people that had followed me along that journey, it doesn't have to be going and doing a huge adventure. It can be tiny things, but whatever you do, that thing that you're scared about doing, when you actually come to do it, you'll find that we're evolutionary animals. There is no option. You're not going to sit there and just whimper and let it beat you. You will rise up against it. You'll find all these parts of you, that this strength from nowhere. You hear about people bench pressing cars off their mothers in times of, darkness. You find this strength and it comes from the most surprising places. And when it happens, it's an incredible feeling to be proud of yourself and proud that that's happened. And you really feel that you've grown as a person. So for me, that the last blog was just trying to communicate to that people, to say, don't be frightened. I feel the same as you do. You might think I've done an amazing thing, but to me, there's more amazing things to do. I'm on to the next one. So don't be frightened. We all feel the same, but you've just got to jump and do the things that frighten you, because it will pay off tenfold in the end. And that was it.
Anna, what's next for you?
Oh man, I've got so many ideas. It's quite difficult, actually. Everyone warned me about post-adventure blues, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I think I'm going to plan some small adventures in the UK, because I've come back realising that proportionally I've seen more of the US than I have in the UK, and that this country is beautiful as well, and I should probably go out and see some of it. So my next small adventure is that over Easter I'm going to be running the length of Hadrian's Wall, which is a Roman wall that was built way back, I think about 1800 years ago, and it's about 86 miles long. So I'm going to run it dressed as a Roman, because I think you might as well. I'm doing it with a couple of friends, and I think the pictures would be great, and also it's a good way for you to learn about the history, and for when I'm talking to kids as well, for them to kind of get engaged with the history of the wall and what it means. So that's the next mini challenge. So that's about 5 days. After that, I think I'll probably leave it about another year and a half. That will probably be what it takes for me to actually save up some money to go on a big adventure again. But I've got 1,000 ideas at the moment. I mean, I don't just like cycling. I like kayaking, swimming. I looked at the longest rollerblading world record the other day. I think the biggest thing for me is probably to find somewhere that I've got a real curiosity about, like I had with the US, settle on a place and then decide how I'm going to travel that place and what would make a good story and engage people to kind of travel it with me, I think.
Anna, how can people contact you if they want to learn more?
I'd say Twitter or email, probably the best two. So I'm Anna McNuff on Twitter, easy enough to remember. And then I'm Anna at thebig50.com for email. And I'm on email and Twitter all the time. So I'm really open for people. I've already had a lot of people asking me questions that are planning similar trips by bike or just adventure planning in the first place. Or I've had a lot of questions from people who are really on the edge of doing their first big adventure, but kind of just don't feel like they're ready to jump yet. So I'm absolutely always up for a Skype or a chat or an email, and to help any way I can. Because I've been there. I was there a couple of years ago. So yeah.
Anna McNuff, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and good luck in your next adventure running the Hadrian's Wall and in writing that book. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're welcome. Recorded March 9, 2014. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.